It's okay to fail. When people want to shame you for failing, they're just shaming themselves. And it does not matter what other people say. You just know that you're a good person, and maybe you did something that wasn't right, but you are a good person. That thing that you did, that behavior was probably not a good thing. Whatever it is. And I'm directly correlating this to my lessons learned from getting canceled and having my human person be so intertwined with my brand.
Keep it nerdy. Keep it nerdy. Keep it real nerdy. Nerdpreneur, you know I love my work. Life's a game, so I'ma take my turn. Nerds deserve to put their passion first. Let them rap a verse so they can all be heard.
Yeah, my nerdy passion basically is drawing.
Correct. I'm a breeder of tarantulas, importing tarantulas and some other critters.
I am a harpist. I do mainly Celtic harp, video game songs, songs from nerdy TV shows.
Obviously, I'm big on Star Trek.
It is creature design, fantastical biological creations out of watercolor.
We are dice retailers.
Nerdpreneur, you know I love my work. Life's a game, so I'ma take my turn. Nerds deserve to put their passion first, so let them rap a verse so they can all be heard.
Welcome to Nerdpreneur, where we have fun conversations with people making money with their nerdy passion. My name is Chris, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Frank.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest. She's a professional coach who brings over 25 years of storytelling and game design expertise to help you conquer life's quests and achieve your dreams. Satine Phoenix, welcome to Nerdpreneur.
What a wonderful welcome. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
We're very excited to have you on, and thanks for coming on our podcast. You've actually been someone I've wanted to get on for a long while, but I'm just excited that it's finally happening. Now, at our pod, the very first question we always ask is, Satine, what is your nerdy passion?
Biohacking.
Biohacking?
Yeah.
Frank is like, that's not what we know you for. No.
What? Exactly.
Well, that's the point, right? I mean, obviously, I love Dungeons and Dragons, but when that's just what you do for a living, then suddenly other things start welling up. And I'm over 40 and realized, oh boy, I gotta figure things out. So yeah, it's biohacking.
Biohacking.
Interesting. Yeah.
What is biohacking?
Yeah, exactly. Like, lay it on me for like a 5-year-old here.
All right, so it sounds cool. It's biohacking, but really it's understanding your human body so that you can reach the pinnacle and the most optimal performance of what you're capable of. So it's not like I want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like I want to be the best version of me. Or as other nerds would know, I want to be level 20 version of me. And maybe I'm level 5, maybe I'm level 10, maybe I'm actually level 16 and I'm really close. It's about understanding who I are, where I are at any given time. And so therefore it's eating right for where you are right now. Because like I said, I'm over 40. I cannot eat the way I ate when I was in my 20s or even my 30s. Definitely not when I was in high school.
Yeah, it starts to show up after 30. Like you have to. I remember when I turned to like 30, I'm like, oh, things that I eat, I can't just eat this and be fine anymore. I can't just sit around and be fine. You have to start taking conscious effort and care of your body and being more conscious around what it is that you eat and do. So if that's biohacking, that's severe. That's very interesting.
Sign me up.
It's a slice of it, right? So also being over 40, and if you're over 30, I highly recommend getting your hormones checked. So I'm on testosterone. I'm on progesterone. I had like none. Apparently, they found out that cortisol, that thing that rises up when you're in a panic situation, it actually takes other elements out of your body. So your entire body is made of cells and hormones and like little mitochondria and peptides and all this stuff. And so you get a signal over here, the rest of your body goes, hey, put resources over here. And then it does. So cortisol, where does it come from? It comes from your testosterone, your progesterone. So then you have people that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s starting to deteriorate, not knowing why their levels are so low. And it's because of these high stress situations. Now, it could be like childhood trauma, or it could even be like the stress of scrolling through your phone, watching the world burn. It's
Amen.
all very stressful. And so that's another aspect of it. It's the hormones, it's the peptides. Yeah, I
Man, we
love
could
it.
totally, I know Chris and I could totally go down this rabbit hole. It is so tempting. But, we will talk about that. I would love to start, though, kind of in the beginning of your branding journey. So I was hoping
Okay.
you could just share a little bit of how it started for you, or where you started, or what part of your journey you'd like to talk about.
It all started with David Bowie.
Ooh.
So I don't know. I've always been a very like intellectual child. Through my whole life, I've been an intellectual child. So I used to play with time, right? My grandmother was my best friend. She was like obviously way older than me. And so I would see people in different strands of time. And so at 8 years old, I'm imagining what being 60 years old is like. I'm imagining being what 30 years old is like. And then I was obsessed because this is like the 80s. I was obsessed with David Bowie because here's a man or a creature of space who's reinvented himself every phase. So humans go through phases. We have a cellular turnover every 7 years. And if you are along the correct developmental cycle in your own system, you have different interests, right? And so I watched it. I watched it play out in his life. I watched it play out in my parents' life and the people around me. So I'm like, okay, I'm like 10 years old. What do I want to be when I'm 20? What do I want to be when I'm 30, 40, 50, 60? And so I kind of developed as a kid an a general idea of where I wanted to go. I knew there was acting in there. I knew there was comic books in there. I knew there was TV, and I knew there was like all these different elements. Right now, I know that when I'm 80, I'm going to be making artwork for hospitals and hotels. It's like my retirement plan. And then when I'm 90, I'm going to have like, I don't know, I'm going to live on an island in Japan and then just have like a little bed and breakfast. So I have these like long-term goals. But then the nearer goals are like, where am I in my developmental stage? When I'm 20 years old, I got into adult work. I was like, who am I sexually? And so I was like, okay, I wasn't developing a brand. I was just being an artist. I went to art school for 5 years, um, classically trained, traditional illustration, sculpture. And I was like, okay, I need to like be present in my system. I need to overcome the terrible childhood that I was in. I just leaned in and I said, okay, I guess I'm doing this. And so an entire like span of my 20s, I did the things that people are afraid to do in their 20s, which is explore the things you're like freaking out about. Like I need to try all these things. I'm obsessed and my fantasies are taking me over like a lot of normal humans do. Well, I said, wow, okay, I'm going to go do that. And then I did it. I did it a lot. and and then I was like, oh, I satisfied that urge. I scratched that itch. I'm done now. And I knew I was like, okay, I'm only going to do it while I'm in my 20s. I hit 30, boom, pivoted. Met a guy, got me out of the adult industry. We were really hardcore nerds together. He collected Marvel. I started organizing Dungeons and Dragons events. And it just kind of moved. Everything in my life went when I didn't get in my own way. And so that's kind of a roundabout way of saying, like, you don't know till you know, right? And so I knew that I needed to be in public and I needed to reach people because I wanted to help people overcome their obstacles. Now, my childhood trauma happened starting at 8, ended at 17. So I had this, and then also I played with time, which is, I don't even understand myself sometimes. But I knew that I would be a part of a movement of people to help heal others who've gone through the pains and traumas that I went through, right? And so I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 8 years old. I've been in acting. I've been an artist. I knew all these things. So by the time I hit, when did I start branding specifically? I think it was right after Celebrity Charity 20, and I started doing the live stream Dungeons and Dragons in 2012. I was like, okay, I'm having a good time, but I need to wear this. And I'm like 32. right? I'm like, I need to wear something, and I need something to be stable in my life. And I knew that I wanted a family. I'm like, okay, how do I do that? Business. Okay. Well, what does this mean? I don't know, but I really like raising money for other people. Okay. And it kind of had this catalyst. I'm sitting down with my friend Sax, and he goes, well, you're like the queen of D&D. And I was like, is that a thing? He's like, yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, awesome. And then I did some interviews, and someone else was like, she's the queen of D&D on Time Magazine. I was like, I'm the queen of D&D. This is great. Okay, I can go somewhere with this. And at the same time, I was making comics. So I gathered information. I developed my skill and my mana pool set, and I utilized all my past and all my knowledge and my hopes and dreams and made a character of myself. And I did it because David Bowie did it, and he did it so many times. And that's where it all comes back, right? So I knew that every 7 to 10 years, I'm going to need to pivot. And so the brand was Satine Phoenix, Queen of D&D. And then got canceled. Everything went up in flames. And I'm like, oh, people are like, you should kill yourself. And I'm like, I'm my brand. I ruined the world, and I did some healing and realized actually that was a really good, important phase in my life. I knew I was at the end of that business phase. I knew there was a cycle. I'm like, like how many women admit to being 40 in LA? Like that's not a thing. And I was like, oh, this whole thing's going to crash down. And then it did, because I think I helped manifest it. And now I'm like, okay, I am not that brand. But I am, let's see, how can I put this? I'm not that brand. I am that brand. I am not what they say I am. I am me. Therefore, I can be any brand.
The brand that you have created has taken several shapes. And I think it would be fascinating. I envision that, and Chris, you tell me what you think, but I envision that there is a listener that's like, I want to build a brand, my own brand too. And Satine has done a fantastic job. So I want to see, what has Satine done that, words are hard, but what has Satine done that I can learn from, that I can do?
Know what is important to you. If you want to make a brand, what is important to you and your soul? Money will come and go. I made a crap ton of money many times in my life, and I've been homeless multiple times. I've had lots of money, and I had zero money, and I've had negative money, and it all comes and goes, and it comes and goes in where your mind is at and where your mindset's at. And so if you're trying to build a brand, think long term, but also think about what you bring to the table, right? Going to art school, I learned project management. I was a programmer. I know how to organize. I know systems. I'm a gamer. I know how to gamify and level up and see myself and see my character for what it is, and how to get the crap beaten out of my character and have a friend come and revivify me, right? Like that's super important. Having your allies and your friends there, and knowing that at a game table, people come in, people leave. In a game table of 5 or 6 people, you're going to get 3 consistent people. And so all those lessons gave me the courage to say, actually, at the bottom of all of it, I just want to help people. And so how can I help myself and then help people while I'm helping myself? And that is biohacking, uh, you know, positive manifestation, overcoming obstacles through aging. And so, yeah, transformative life coaching.
I think a lot of people, when we say put this out, they're going to be like, oh, Satine Phoenix, I know her from D&D or from live streaming or from pro game mastering or all those awesome things that are very much like the nerdpreneur side of it. And I was wondering, when you were going through that, your story is very much rooted in following your passions, it sounds like, and things that you were very excited and interested. What I'm curious about is, we've got the nerd side of nerdpreneur, that passion and going after it. At what point, like you said, you had some real success, and you did, in the D&D space. And if you would mind talking a little bit about, how did you start thinking about turning those specific passions into businesses, or into a business where, yes, you were serving people, but also you were receiving revenue for various different things that you were doing. And because some people don't even believe you can make money doing this nerdy stuff, all right? Like that's what we're trying to show people, is it's possible to be a successful and thriving and abundant nerd in your space, and be able to do that. So could you speak a little bit about what are some of those things that turned into businesses?
Yeah. So if you can imagine, my gaming career was about 13 years old. I didn't get paid for 6 years. I'm literally bleeding money. I don't even know. I was just obsessed with game nights and game afternoons at Meltdown Comics. I'm like running events. So in 2010, so I started those things like 2009, 2010. In 2010, I invented live stream Dungeons and Dragons over at Meltdown. That was where Nerdist started. Nerdist was a podcast.
Yeah, Nerdist. Chris Hardwick.
Dan Harmon was in the back doing comedy, and he would do his shows there. And then I had a bunch of friends come, and we were like, okay, how do we raise money for charity? Oh, well, we can stream it. And so for 2 years, I like trialed and errored, and it was bad. It was awful. The people that were there were amazing. It was actors, voice actors, it was producers, directors, and like people in the entertainment world. And so finally in 2012 I nailed it, and I was like, this is it. And people literally still use the same format. I'm like, please invent a new format, like come on. But the people who were with me that whole time were Matt Mercer, Taliesin, Marisha. And so in 2014 they went to Geek and Sundry, or maybe Geek and Sundry went and found them. They have their own history, and we're like, yeah, we've been doing this, let us do this here. And so they started Critical Role. And so I was like, huh, you get paid for doing this? That's amazing. And I was like, cool, cool. And I'm still running events. I'm going to conventions. I'm still bleeding money. I'm like literally thousands. I think over the course, and I did the budget after the fact, and I probably spent over $100,000 just over traveling and providing things for people and like production and all of this. And the money that we got for the charity went to the charity, right? It's called Reach Out and Read. Highly recommend it. It's for to get pediatricians to teach parents how to get their kids to read and the importance of it. And like, it's really cool, very small.
And this was all out of D&D live streaming that you were kind of doing. Was that where this was all coming in? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and you said like this was you and
no
the
one else was
back of a
doing
store.
it.
No one else said. Like you started this idea, and then other people started to be like, hey, this could be really cool. And then obviously it's emerged. And so when you say the format, you said the format. What do you mean? Is it just like playing a game online and live streaming it?
Squares on the screen?
Yeah, it's more like so yeah, the first time I was like, yeah, we're gonna all be on the same web page, and we're gonna film it all in one room. So we had like 4 tables. Each table had a webcam and a recorder. And so you can imagine like the echoing, and it was just awful. And it's on one web page. Then the next year it was like, okay, everyone gets their own web page. But then it was like, what is bandwidth? Wah, wah, wah,
right.
And so eventually I was like, okay, and I'm doing this with Keith Baker, who created Eberron, and I'm like a huge fan. But then he became one of my best friends, and I'm like, come over, dude. You're like, sleep on my couch and it'll be cool. And it felt like high school. It felt like college. It was just like so innovative and edgy. And so it was like, okay, well, let's just do one at a time. We do one table. We have the game master in the middle. And we have like players on the sides. And then we just go 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours. I think originally it was like 4 hours. And it's like, God, you can't fit that many people in a day. So it was about maximization. How do we get the most people to play and get the biggest reach with our audience, right? It's all networking. It's like the super cheesiest thing about Los Angeles was also the best way to get funding from fans and the best way to reach fans. And so you see this all the time in charity events, over Zoom. Zoom created the boxes. But in 2016, D&D came to Meltdown, and they're like, oh, that's the girl that runs this. And then Force Grey had just come out, maybe like, I don't know, that year or something. And so they had a big Force Grey event, and Meltdown Comics was like the hub, the super nerd hub. Everyone would go there. That's when I met Dungeons and Dragons as like the people who make the books, and I
Wizards of
was
the
like, "Oh my
Coast
god."
specifically, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
you
So I'm
worked
just
directly
like,
with them, didn't you, for a
"Oh
while?
man." So I was the first one. I was like, "Look, I want the license to Eberron because back then you couldn't stream like licensed content. And so I have it here somewhere. I have the contract and I like cherish it because it was a huge thing. It's like, here I am doing the thing that I love. They say, we recognize you. We see you. You're over there in that comic shop and we see how hard you're working. We see you when you go to all the conventions. I literally had to fight my way into conventions because it was such a boys club, which is dumb. That's like 2010, right? I would walk in all dressed up, and I'm like, and granted, I had been in a previous web series called I Hit It With My Axe. It was like porn stars and strippers playing Dungeons and Dragons, very hooky, right? Very like clickbaity.
Who's not going to watch that or click on it at
Oh,
least,
it
right?
was also like hilarious because
Your
it was
audience
just,
would have been crazy, I'm sure.
oh, it was wild. We were in like Maxim and Playboy, like it was crazy. But like then they'd watch it and they're like, oh, they're just playing Dungeons and Dragons.
They're actually playing D&D. That's all this is. What?
Yeah, exactly. So the catalyst of all of it was like I got paid for that a little bit, but I didn't really. And then boom, I did it long enough to be seen. And so that's when things started moving. I got the license. It was my ex. He and I started Maze Arcana, and it was just like this thing. It was this big whirlwind. We met, and then 6 months later, we got the license, and we're like, it's a whole thing. And then we were like, okay, I had been in a car accident, and so I was producing because I couldn't speak on camera. I was like, I got in a bad car accident. And so he was the game master, and I'd play because sometimes I would like literally glitch out because I had like severe TBI, traumatic brain injury. And yeah, eventually I was like, well, I want to do it too because I am an actress. And then I started game mastering, and then we started traveling with D&D, and that was 2016. 2018, I meet up with a director over at Dungeons and Dragons, and he's like, and this, we've been doing live events. Like it by here, I'm like indoctrinated into the cult of Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, I will do anything. And they're like, well, we actually want you to be you, but for us. Which was funny because I was in negotiations with Vampire the Masquerade to be like the head of their show. And so they didn't like that. It didn't end up working. But that's when I first got paid because slash I got paid. Maze Arcana would receive money to put on a show, but they didn't give us hardly any money. So that money would come in, pay the cast, and pay some of the production team, but I'm still like forking out money to the production team, and paying for things, and it's in my apartment. So it's just like chaos, right? And so yes, we got paid, but it wasn't enough. But the great thing was is that it didn't need to be enough. It was enough, but it wasn't enough. But it was totally enough because I got to do the thing. And and then eventually, like we broke up, we separated. I left the company, and then I started my own. And then there was a big thing. There's like a cancel culture thing happened, and then I stopped being the community manager for Dungeons and Dragons, and I started building my production company. And then I was like, okay, now I'm starting to get sponsorships. Now I'm starting to get, and this is what, like 8 years, 9 years in. That's obsession. It's a little crazy, actually. That's
What
all
was
crazy.
that? Like, why did you keep going? Why didn't you just be like, well, you know what? This is clearly not working out after year 3 or year 4. Like, what kept you going to be like, you know what? I gotta keep this thing. I can't just get a day job or whatever, or go work for a company.
I'm an illustrator. So like I said, I went to art school, a graphic designer, illustrator, character designer, storyboard artist. And I was working for a toy company at the time. I did 3 graphic novels and a nonfiction on storytelling all in that time. So here I am twice a week at Meltdown running D&D, also running their life drawing classes and also working. So it's like, I don't know. My therapist and I were like, "What are you running from? Like, what are you not willing to face?" And for me, it's like severe childhood trauma. And so that's part of it, right? It's like some people can just have normal lives and just relax and watch TV. Others have to like literally make
Workaholic. Yeah.
things. Yeah. And so like I'm a little recovered from that, but that is what it took for that moment.
Yeah, I hear that it definitely takes a lot of that drive, that push but it's just funny because a lot of the time when people talk about driving and being pushing yourself, they don't always realize that sometimes it comes from not the best place. And something you're talking about, Chris and I have talked about it before. Like, um, I think you're more qualified to speak on this than me, but the thought I wanted to get out there is I feel like we all have some sort of stress or fire behind us, propelling us. I think it's really, there's a really good point of people recognizing where this is coming from for themselves. Because if you know that you're running from something and you can face it, whatever that means for the individual, then it makes you that much stronger. And it ties in so well with, I think, your brand of like the that Japanese art of the golden, what's it called? Please help me.
Kintsukuroi. Kintsugi. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That one. I'm sorry. I'm not going to say it. I
It's all
don't
good.
want
I'll
to
say
butcher
it for
it.
you.
Thank you. But yeah, it's that idea of recognizing like, hey, you may have been damaged at one time, but then when you put yourself back together and you look at the cracks and you look at everything, you can become so much more than what you were
Yes.
before.
Yeah.
And you have in this story tried so hard and you tried for so long to get noticed by Wizards of the Coast. And actually, I worked at Wizards of the Coast for a little bit of the time that you were there. I worked in customer support. And
oh my gosh, that's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Don't be casual about that. That's awesome.
It was totally random. Because I was just like working at my desk, and you came up to the CS, the team, and you were talking to Blake
Yes.
or Blair, and you were like talking to him about something, and I was like, her hair. I recognize that hair. Oh, wait. And then I asked like my manager, and they're like, that's Satine Phoenix. And I was like, shut the fuck up. Like, you can't, no way. And I had just been to PAX where I saw you on a panel talking about Arcanum. And it was you guys were talking about like the experience and starting to live stream. That was what the panel was about, because I was super curious. And then, we're here today, and I've been telling people like, yeah, we're talking to Satine Phoenix. And some people are like, oh, I'm not in the D&D world. What is that? And I say, she started live streaming. She started D&D live stream. She's the one that made it a thing. And so, this is partly to say, hey, look at what you have created. That's super awesome. But it's also kind of what Chris said. You stuck with it, and you were working super hard. And that is something I didn't know, that you had multiple things going on. So now I kind of want to bring it back. Like, how did you manage to do all of that?
Well, apparently, people don't like it when you're just running and sprinting ahead. I found out later.
Really? What do you mean?
So, yeah, apparently your team wants you there all the time. And if you don't develop your team by like vetting people, right? Then you get people a part of what you're doing who are there for their own reasons, attach odd attachment styles, right? Validation. Um, very odd for me from the business world. Like I was like, oh, what do you mean you need me here all the time? You should be doing your job. You are so not emotionally well, whatever. And it's like, oh, that's odd. And so I had this momentum, right? So now that I'm in the business world, I'm like, oh, I can see that is unhealthy. I need to be able to do my thing because I'm a CEO, and that, like, do not hold me back, because I will literally hire somebody that can do what you are doing. And that's a really brutal way of saying like boundaries. Jeez. But I have a different momentum now. The momentum I had before was I daddy issues, attachment, really weird attachment styles I had. Worse, now it's much better. So here I am in a relationship with Dungeons and Dragons since I'm 8 years old. It is a thing that saved me. I fought the monsters in the game. I couldn't fight the monster in real life. And so it was a part of me in a way that other people could not understand. And I'm sure other people can relate to this in their own way. So by the time I'm 30, right, like dysfunction, complete and utter dysfunction. And I'm reeling in people saying, hey, I'm dysfunctional, and here's my escapist mechanism. And other people are like, that's my favorite escapist mechanism too. And so here we are escaping together, not understanding what it is doing to each other. And so here I am validating bad behavior in the community because now I have to live stream. I have to live stream or nobody's going to love me. Not true, by the way. Figured that out after I got canceled. But it took all of that, right? I am not good enough because I didn't live up to what they wanted me to be or whatever. So the momentum then was, please love me. The momentum now is, oh, I love me. I'm good. Let's do this. And there's more fire now. If I had loved myself appropriately back then, oh my God, I can only imagine where I would be right now.
I just finished a podcast earlier today for my other podcast, talking with someone who is an expert on building teams and hiring good people and working with great people. And um, I ran a business when I was 21 and I didn't know anything about people, about business, about anything. And you would make bad hires. You would be around people and you don't know how to manage them. You don't know what their problems are. And you're just trying to survive. Like, I think a lot of people don't understand sometimes the entrepreneur journey is a lot more, it's a roller coaster. It is a lot more intense. You're the CEO, you're the person running the whole show. So that means all bills, all expenses, all credit is all on you. And if it doesn't work and it doesn't, then the person, they just go get other jobs. You lose everything, right? And there's a pressure that goes from being the top of the pyramid, the person who does and is responsible for everything, that a lot of people, I think, who aren't willing to step into the arena of risk and entrepreneurship, they are unwilling to, or they are unable to even relate to that experience. So there's a lot of blame that can happen. There's a lot of things that can go in that direction that I think can get misconstrued. I know I screwed up a bunch of times when I was a manager, a new manager, managing sales representatives who were 17 all the way up to 25 generally. And there was a lot of them that I was like, I mismanaged or I said the wrong thing or, but I wasn't live streaming to 100,000 people or whatever every single day what I'm doing, And so the benefit that I had was I got to learn a lot of those lessons the hard way, but in privacy of my own entrepreneurial journey. And so I'm curious, like, as you've gone through your experience and you obviously learned a tremendous amount and a lot of inner work to go through and now be where you are there any hard and fast lessons that you now have for just working with people and teams and others that you can impart upon people who might be starting off on their entrepreneurial journey, so we can leverage your wisdom and experience for those that want to step into the arena themselves?
I have so much wisdom. So it's okay to fail. When people want to shame you for failing, they're just shaming themselves. And it does not matter what other people say. You just know that you're a good person and maybe you did something that wasn't right, but you are a good person. That thing that you did, that behavior was probably not a good thing. Whatever it is. And I'm directly correlating this to my lessons learned from getting canceled and having my human person be so intertwined with my brand, right? The other thing I would say is my favorite Instagram thing I post over and over, I repost, which is hire fast, fire faster. Now, one of the strange things that happened with me is I fired a lot. But then suddenly when, people started dogpiling, the people that I fired started coming out of the woodwork. She kicked me out of out of the game. She kicked me out of the company. And it's like, yeah, you didn't get along with my co-creator. Like, why would I keep you and then take him out? Like, he and I own this together. So no, I do not feel bad about that. One girl's like, I got kicked out because he said this thing and I felt mentally raped. I'm like, yeah, I kicked you out because it's not a safe place for you. I'm protecting you. I'm protecting me. I'm protecting him. And I paid her an entire season's worth and said, I'm so sorry. You're not coming back to the next season. This is a bad situation. And I hear you and I validate your experience here. And so I say these things because I can see how easy it is to get swept up in the drama and the pain of other people. But when you are starting your own business, you got to have your foundation set and ready. And I have my dukes up right now, but it's also like guard yourself, right? Learn how to defend yourself, but even like not have to defend yourself, just to protect yourself.
Boundaries.
Yeah, I just learned about that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, boundaries, have boundaries. But this is like the extra important part of this is I used to say this in private, but I'm definitely starting to say things publicly that I used to say in private. As a creator, as an artist, there's the creator and the consumer. As in, Hollywood, there's the producer and the consumer. The consumer is, unless they are also producers, it is very hard for them to understand what you're doing in business. And so for business talk, for business peers, have other people in your life who get that because they speak the same language as you. You don't speak the same language, not always, as the people who are purchasing your thing or being a part of whatever business is that you were there. Maybe it's B2B or B2C or whatever. That is, I think, one of the most important understandings. Now, don't treat people like crap. Treat everybody well. Like, just be a good human. But also, it is a different world that we are in as nerdpreneurs, especially, but entrepreneurs. Nerdpreneurs are even worse. This is even harder because our passions are so intertwined with business. Like right now, I'm making businesses so that I can one day sell them and just keep that creation moving and flowing and not being so attached to it, right? So I have the business of Satine Phoenix, next generation. And I also have these other businesses that I'm going to sell, and it's going to be great. And I love that I can now create things and not be so tenderly intertwined that like they're my babies and a part of me is leaving me. No, I am a whole person. I have a very strong sense of self now. So long answer.
That's interesting about the idea of, so I'm gonna bring up a stereotype. Chris and I are both artists, so it's very easy for an artist to get so emotionally attached, right? That it's hard for them to separate. I mean, like working with freelancers, working with any visual artist, or like, so I work in video. I'm now behind the camera, but for a while I used to be in front of the camera, and I absolutely resonate with the idea of, if you're not a producer, it's really hard to talk to people in the film industry that aren't producers. And I knew that, but I didn't really understand it, and that's why I went into business school, because I wanted to be a producer for film. But the idea that, you are making these things because you're nerding really hard on something. And you're like, I am going to make this a business and then I'm going to flip it. That is honestly not something I hear of very often, at least from a nerdy art centric person. That's kind of blowing my mind a little bit that this and you're like, this is what I like to do. It sounds like you like building the business, building the team, getting it self-running, and then saying, bye-bye.
I had to be completely destroyed in order to figure this out. I literally had to, I meditate, I work out, I eat right. I'm like constantly, I've done so many psychedelics at this point that I've done all the things and I've come back around to like give my, my, universe findings. But it all comes down to non-attachment, create because you have to create. We made live streams and played games publicly. I run hundreds of games and I've done it because I literally can't breathe if I don't. But I also need to exhale and move on. And I see a lot of people, and I'm like, this is where the biohacking comes in. I see people, they hit their threshold, like Queen of D&D. That's it. That's all I'm going to be. Like, what a boring life, right? I'm going to make this company. I'm going to do this for 40 years. Oh, that sounds awful. How can you grow? How can you grow as a person? How can you inspire the people around you? Right?
You're so right when it comes to people wrap their identity up in their work, right? And especially for nerdpreneurs, is our identity is our nerdiness and what we love, and now we're going to try to make money at it. But you kind of washed over something that was really, really important, that you kind of just said in passing and then went into some other wisdom. But you said, I like to separate what the activity from the person. And I think you said it great. I have heard it from Jim Rohn said this way, and I'm not a religious man. He was. So he said, hate the sin, not the sinner. And that might have even been Jesus. Who knows? I'm not religious. But the
At
point,
least 3 people have said this before.
exactly. but the idea of separating the activity or the thing that you do from the person. And so that was a huge distinction in running my own business when I was working with people where their performance, and we're going to get into performance and biohacking soon, when people weren't performing at the levels that they were expected to or that were necessary for them to thrive within my organization as a sales organization, you had to really be careful around how to navigate. I'm not attacking you, but your actions are really bad. I actually hate that you're doing this, this, and this. I love you, but this, and this cannot keep going, right? Whether it's arriving late or whether it's I'm not reading the manual that I said for you to read. Like, if they're just not doing the things that are actually going to get them success, as the manager and the leader of your organization, you're doing no one any good favors. You're actually not doing them any good if you continue to coddle their identity.
Yes.
Versus telling them what they need to do to be successful. And as you mentioned before, like letting people go and firing them. I heard something so good earlier today, and I'm just going to share it. I'm going to rip it off, but from Mike McAllowis. Okay. And you might want to steal this, but he, in his organization, he doesn't fire people. He adds them to his alumni list. Isn't that so good? Oh, I loved it. I heard, I'm like, okay, that is that. Okay, look, we're going to have to we're leaning towards putting you into our alumni list now. And it's like, and we used to say, okay, we're going to launch people up in our organization, or we're going to launch them out of our organization onto their next great thing. And so it's like, let that sink in, you know?
Can I add to that?
Absolutely. Please. Yeah.
I love that so much. Like, I viscerally am feeling it throughout my body as the right thing to do and the right way to look at things. I got to tell you, getting canceled, most horrible thing, would never wish it on anyone. I had it was very bad. Failed suicide attempt bad. But the biggest learning was you got to change the way you think about everything. You got to change the way you think about it. I am not toxic. My behavior is toxic. I like when people, when they come to you and they have crap to say or they face you and you don't like it, it's all a moment of learning and reflection, right? Whether you say it out loud to them or you take it home and you contemplate on it, you meditate on it, everything is important. And so the way you look at firing people, the way you look at hiring people, the way you allow people in, the way you move people out and through, it's just all so important. Um, like manifestation or spells, right? It's like I can say whatever you say and whatever you think comes to life, right? It becomes real because you think it. I can say, wow, my life was ruined because I got canceled. Or I can say, wow, getting canceled was the best learning of my life. And also, I hope other people can find other learning ways in their lives, you know? Um, it is so important that if you are going to do something as crazy as start a business or more, you gotta have positive self-talk, and you gotta that has to resonate within you first and then be emanated out, because you can't fake it, right? You can't be like, I'm gonna give everybody gratitude today, but I feel like crap. Well, you just now are, everything that you say is going to radiate and everyone else is going to feel like crap, even though it might not be vibrantly crappy, but that little thread that you've inserted, that is powerful.
As a CEO, your health and well-being is actually part of the business plan. It's one of those things that people, I learned that the hard way myself by burning out and like overworking and, not working out, not doing the regular daily habits that I need to be doing, not doing the things that I know put me into the peak performance state. And it's so detrimental, because then you do wind up showing up less for your people, and you might be telling everybody else to do. But then when you tell people, when you're out of integrity, all of your influence, I think, actually goes out the window.
Yes.
And the ability to impact and influence people comes from a place of personal integrity. So with these boundaries, or what we want to call, are really not even boundaries. They're really just, walls that you need to live in.
Yeah.
So that you can actually have your house in order and be able to build something much greater. You have to have that foundation so you can go to a skyscraper, 200, floors high.
I'm vibing, dude. This is great. I love this. I keep thinking back. Okay, so got canceled. That sucked. But right before I got canceled, I was doing Satine's Quest. That's like adventures on cruise ships and mansions. I organized it, and I brought people in, and we all were elated. And even if other people had things happening, we all worked it out together. And then I was making, by 2020, I was making, and I'll just say this out loud. I don't think I've ever said this before. I was making like 10 grand a month professional game mastering.
Yeah.
Either it was, I had like 7 Zoom, things. I was coaching for storytelling and game design. Xbox hired me for like stuff. I got hired by all these other live videos. I mean, I made a profession out of my hobby. And so when I was torn away from it, I needed to take that year and a half. It was hard. I kept trying to come in, and I was just like, I was spinning upside down. People are demanding. We still owe the Kickstarters, and I have like a whole thing I can say about that. We made a lot of money on Kickstarter on my husband's company. And so, like, that was real. All of that was the positive parts, but it was my own lack of inner integrity and the toxicity within myself that I had not addressed before or even noticed, and the lack of self-reflection, the go, 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 otherwise they're going to eat me alive. Like, that was where that my responsibility and my lack of looking around and being like super present in all of the business actions, that was my responsibility of why the business like fell apart. The business of me fell apart.
You mentioned integrity, and it reminds me of something you said earlier about, if you're going to be a business owner, get your guard up, get your your foundation, get your understanding of yourself, but also know how to set the boundaries. That's what I said. I'm not maybe you didn't say boundaries,
We're like
but
this.
like,
We're
yeah,
like this.
yeah. And like, so you want to have a good idea of who you are, is what I'm hearing. And you want to also have a good idea of how to defend yourself. And that doesn't mean just like combatively batting people away. What I mean, and I'm not projecting. I just mean that I really like how people can know who they are, and they can explain rationally where they're coming from in a way that defends their input and their thought and their contributions. And that is what I hear you say. And that is something that I have very much been on the journey for the last, no, I don't know, but it feels like last 5 years, probably longer. But this idea of, how do I contribute now that I'm at a position of management? I have to be able to put these visuals, these videos that I put out there, and these ideas. I have to be okay with accepting feedback, but I also have to know when to stand my ground. When I didn't really ever have boundaries up until I was about 30. And it's like, how? And so I say this to kind of get to a point. I feel like there are plenty of other nerds out there that are similarly struggling to find their boundaries, but also wanting to run a business.
Mm-hmm.
And how does somebody find their boundaries and start a business well enough to start a business?
In
With
nerddom.
what we're talking in nerddom.
That's the hard part. I love the business world outside of nerddom. It has been warm and welcoming and not painful at all. It's been so human. When people are good at going to school, getting a job, paying their bills. For people who actually who've made it that far, they're good at that. That is not to say that they're doing what they want to do or they spent time doing what they want to do. They usually do the thing that they're supposed to do. And when you're doing something for someone else, it's easy. When you're doing something for you, oh my God, it is hard.
Yes.
I don't think I've heard of more self-doubt than people wanting to do what they normally do in the nerd world.
Yes.
It's like not different, except for it is. And it's different because the stakeholders are different.
Mm.
The stakeholders say, we own you because you're in our pool. Geek and Sundry. Super fun. Obviously, I was there for a really long time. We had a lot of fun together. There was something that happened over the Geek and Sundry era where people had the ability to tip $20, $25, $100. I watched the community shift and change. They created something called Alpha. People were donating like a lot of money. Some people would donate $100 every day. I mean, it was maniacal, right? Geek and Sundry's like, that's cool, but why don't we just like make our own TV station and we'll just charge you $5? So they made it. They spent all this time making it. They put it out. People were livid, pissed off. That's not rational to me to be upset that a company sees you, says, thank you for supporting us. We've now made a platform. You don't have to give us that money. You just $5 to run it. And they basically boycotted it and said, no, we want to have the choice. They spent 2 years on this project and people did not enjoy it. What I did see was in the chats, this ownership, this like, you are doing an entertaining thing for me and you should do it for free. And also, I will pay you when I want to. Like, it's all the most wacky, bizarre, infantile. I'm not saying people are infantile or toxic, but I'm saying this behavior is like what I've seen in my stepdaughter, right? She's 6.5 now. She's very mature. But like when she was younger, I'm like, oh wow, that's entitlement. That's what that looks like. And so you got to be careful. You got to know your audience. When you're going into the nerd community, I'm like, okay, how do we charge the most minimal amount for this cruise event? I literally didn't even get paid for it.
Mm.
And I got message after message. You are exploiting us. You are trying to get money out of. I'm like, I'm literally broke. Like I am not being able to make money off of this because I'm providing something and I've given the discounts. I've taken it down, hoping that in a couple of years enough people want to be a part of it that I will make it in the long run.
Satine, I want to ask something that might be, hell, we might not use this, but I wanted to figure out a way to ask about some of the allegations and about people not being paid. And I want to put this out there as a question because what I'm hearing is you yourself are okay with not being paid because you love it to your very core, which I mean, phenomenal, first off. But it sounds like there's a possibility that when you don't think about you needing to be paid, it's easy to not think about other people needing to be paid. And I'm wondering how that ties in, if at all.
If it was true that a person hadn't gotten paid, then I can see where you were thinking that. Imagine our accountant pays all of the invoices that come in. And when I work for somebody and I want to get paid, I send an invoice. Pretty straightforward, right? So there was a woman who posted, I never got paid. The same woman handed in her product, months late after, and I had the team saying, and this is not my company, so I can't speak to some things. Handed her thing late. The entire team was like, we got to cut her out. Like, she is not showing up. And I was like, nope, I love her. I believe in her. I know she's going to make a kick-ass product. And she did months later. And then she posted it online. I never got paid. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And then I think our accountant reached out and they're like, you never sent us an invoice. So she goes, oh, it got lost. Here it is again. We never got a receipt that it was sent. We got whatever. Maybe she messed up. Maybe she didn't. It's none of my business. They paid her immediately.
I
And
see.
so I made this thing. And then so she took the post down. But when people are angry, and this is one of my big life lessons, when people are angry, they will attach themselves to a moment in time. That moment in time is real for them, even if it has nothing to do with them. Right? And so they screenshotted it. So it looks, oh my God, we didn't pay people. I'm like, okay, who else? I know there was one woman out there that I did not pay, and she was my assistant. And after I left this company, I like didn't pay her. And we had this thing where I'm like, when I get money, I will pay you. And it was like, I was like almost homeless. It was like a whole bad thing. This was like 2018, 2019. She goes, that's okay. I'm like, well, send me the invoice. And so I can't find that invoice. That is the one thing that I know that, like, man, I wish you would send me another invoice so I could pay it. But I will not pay money that I do not have proof that I owe something.
Yeah.
And so other people are like, I never got paid. It's like, send an invoice. Now, here's the real question. Do you want to get paid or do you want a platform?
Can you elaborate? I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd love to, because you've mentioned being canceled a number of times, and we've kind of danced around it. Could maybe you just walk us through what that situation was and how it went through? Just because I think a lot of people who maybe this is the first time they're ever hearing about you, and they've heard cancellation, they can make up all sorts of stories about what it is that might be way worse than what it actually is. So let's just address what it actually is so that it gets handled properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to that. To finish this thought, it's if you actually wanted to get paid, you would send me an invoice. I made it very clear on my video. I said, if you didn't get paid, send an invoice and we'll pay you. Not hard, right? I didn't get any message. I got nothing. So anyone that wants to say that, I'm like, okay, either you want to get paid or you want a platform for something. And this is where things start getting a little funny, where all of a sudden, so my husband yelled at somebody, said very like mean things, and said, oh, you're acting like a child. It was like pretty mean, but not like ruin our life mean, in my opinion, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I can totally understand how he hurt this guy's feelings, maybe triggered something that created another trauma response. We were friends after that. There's like politics behind the scenes that I found out about later that made me go, oh man, of course that hurt, like broke me. But also there's like other, and I can't bring up these other people because then they'll do a thing, but imagine that there's jealousy in the arena where I'm literally doing the thing that I love to do, and I have to because I can't breathe if I'm not doing it. And then there's other people doing things for ego. They're doing things for validation. And this is the whole social climbing thing in Hollywood, right? So roundabout, my tattoo artist got upset with my husband because my husband yelled at him over text message after doing a 3-day tattoo. And he even warned my husband. He's like, you're going to have chemicals in your body and it is going to make you aggro. And it did. And that's real. And he was sorry about it. And like a year later, he actually went up to him and apologized for it. And he goes, thanks. But apparently he wasn't over it. There were other elements that happened that I found out about later that led to the cancellation. And I was like, oh, okay. Then suddenly somebody says, well, this happened to me and he was a dick to me and he was a dick and she was a dick. And then this woman that was the producer of the thing, she goes, Satine made me hold her coffee and lorded her power over me. And I was like, hold on here. Hold on a second. Hold on. I'm sorry. You asked me if I needed help. And I said, yeah. Can you hold my coffee while I'm videotaping? We're videotaping for like 10 hours a day and I'm going to need some coffee, but it looks kind of tacky. Then she got mad at me for this, that, and that. And she became this like whole leader of this army that literally came after. And then Brian Foster got like triggered because he was in a cult. And then he decides that like, oh, Jameson's a cult leader. Not a cult leader. He's like introverted and literally like can't be around people for very long. So here you have stories where literally in a gaming community where we come up with stories about these nefarious characters, right? And yeah, one person had ammo, another person said, "Go get them, use your ammo," and boom. And then what I found out later is there was like a whole like plan, and people wanted things. I don't even know if I should go into it or allowed to go into it. It wasn't a thing that was like, you know what, I'm feeling like this. There was a catalyst that happened. And my husband he was a very angry person. And he yelled at a lot of people. He yelled at a lot of people in business. You can't do that. You just can't. And so there was a thing where he coerced me to be a part of one of the yelling at my tattoo artist. And I was like, yep, I got coerced. And that sucked. And I'm an adult. And we hung out. The guy was at our wedding. He like drank with us at our wedding. So all of a sudden he's canceling us. Like, come on, there's more going on here. Yeah, so that's kind of like the canceling thing. There was no like racism or like sexism, but people they wanted a platform, and I had a big ass platform. People were coming out of the woodwork.
Well, you were the queen of D&D, right? Like there is
Yeah, but what
a,
even
a
is that?
place,
It's
right?
just it's like floating words in the
well,
ether.
well, right, exactly. Like we attach whatever meaning and story we want
Yeah.
to that, and many other people like, but to be the, sort of the couple or the people of D&D at that time, which D&D was like, I don't want to say it's not huge now, but like there was a real peak around that time where
Oh
everything
man.
was about D&D and everywhere
Yeah.
online was about D&D. And so, and when you compare cancellations in the D&D community to like cancellations on the national stage and what people get canceled for, it's way tamer than like, you're not like, when you step into the real business world outside of the nerdpreneur area, I am not surprised you find it so nice and
I
sort
got
of relaxed
shamed.
and
Like
completely like that.
shame.
Yeah,
Like who does that?
yeah,
Like
this
that's
was
not a
The
good
internet,
human thing to
apparently.
do.
I think I remember sending you a message being like, you got a mob coming for you for very little. Like I'm looking at even, these screenshots and things that people say and stuff. And I'm just like, this is a sensitive community. This is a very sensitive community. I'm not saying that it's not important to sometimes be sensitive and be around that. I think, but as someone who has, as someone who's been in real business and sales and been rejected hundreds of times and had like, and been broke and bankrupt and all sorts of things, come back and had money, like, the big picture of dealing with something like, oh my god, this person was really rude to me and a little bit like aggressive or was loud or didn't was I don't know what yelling over text even is. I don't even know what that is. But but the idea of that being the reason why you are canceled was shocking to me at that moment. So I do just want to say that I was sort of like shocked to watch the whole thing as it was unfolding, because it said more about our community at
Yeah.
D&D than I think it did necessarily about you. And not to say we don't have responsibilities in ourselves, and we have to obviously continually grow and improve and take responsibility for what we did do. I just thought the time of what it was and the blow up of what it was seemed disproportionate to like real world problems.
Thank you.
Is
Yeah,
all I'm
you're
saying.
right. And also, I also feel very responsible that here I am with this massive platform, and we're doing this thing where we're playing a game and we're getting into people's imaginations, but not even just their imaginations. We're getting into their 6-year-old imagination. The little part of them that wants armor, that needs armor, right? So I went back to school. I'm studying psychology because it is important for me to understand how we all relate to one another and how we are interacting and the damage we can do. You've got people who are literally saying, "Please help me." A lot of the accusations are, "I wasn't seen. I felt rejected. I felt abandoned by Satine." And so once I like did a year and a half worth of therapy and like real deep diving, I was like, "Oh my god, I was like their mother figure." And I'm not saying like, "Oh, they looked at me like I'm their mom," but like way down deep in the psyche, I gave nothing. I was a canvas for people to project upon, and I literally did that. Like I did that. I didn't want people to know who I was really on the inside. Nobody knew me. I'd walk at a convention people would talk at me. I would talk up on the panels, but I didn't give any of my personal like humanness. And so here they are projecting, and here whatever platform I'm on just crumbles because it's made out of cellophane.
Because it's the human part, it's the part that people forget. Because in Joseph Campbell's idea of myth and celebrity status in current society, you are what people are using as their symbol, their image.
Yes.
But forgetting that, whereas Hercules may or may not have been a guy who people put in this pedestal, it's a lot harder to knock Hercules down if he was not a real person, whereas you are a real person.
Yeah, and if somebody says, "Can I help you?" and my therapist has been telling me, "Dude, you gotta accept help." It was like one of those perfect storm moments, and I said, "Yes, I am human. I would like help. I'm tired of doing all the things. Can you help me do a thing?"
Yeah.
Yes, I will accept it. Nope, you're supposed to say no. Who made that rule? I don't know about that. That's not what I'm supposed to say. I cannot read your mind. And that is how it happens a lot. You've got game masters at a table. It seems like we can read your mind. It seems like we are these magic creatures who are like weaving these tales. But really, we are just people. Actors are people. Musicians are people. People are people. Creators, we make mistakes. We are not all knowing. And we need to be treated and respected the way a person would respect themselves. But then I guess that is the next part of it, right? If they're not respecting themselves and they've felt a lot of shame and a lot of rejection, it's easy if you don't have that self-reflection to put it out onto another person and then attack them. And like literally that's what I'm learning in therapy and in psychology, right? But the problem is I'm a business. And so if I get bullied, the business gets bullied. Money doesn't come in. Suddenly, the money that we made on the Kickstarter goes to the entire team. And like, I never saw anything. And then I was jobless for a long period of time. Couldn't get work. I couldn't even get up, So it's like, do you want to be a brand? I guess this is a warning episode.
Very much is like, what does it take and what are the potential consequences?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask one more thing, and maybe we can move on to some of the biohacking stuff because I know we're running lower on time, but I just wanted to ask, is there anything that you would want to say to the people that canceled you now?
No, absolutely not. I've said everything I want to say. I would say that if somebody thinks that I owe them money, please send me an invoice. In a year and a half, this many came in.
For everyone listening, that's a 0.
That's a big 0. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, gamify your life. That is what you do now. You are a transformational life coach, and I love the fact that you're using the nomenclature of nerddom in much of what you're doing for people to maximize performance. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you found your way into this after the cancellation and everything that happened there. How did you find your way into this new rendition of Satine?
We'll call it a reinvention.
You just finished part 1 of our interview with Satine Phoenix. There was just too much in this interview to squeeze into just one show, so we made it a 2-parter. Now, if you liked part 1, you're definitely not going to want to miss part 2. So hit follow in your podcast app, and part 2 will show up in the next 7 days. Thanks again for listening, and as always, everyone, keep it nerdy.